The Second World War was an area of great innovation in destructive matters. On both sides of the conflict, the troops had powerful rifles, machine guns and grenades, which was reflected in the blood that spread throughout much of Europe. Among Allied nations, the United States emerged as one of the armies with the highest quality and quantity of weaponry. Even today, in the popular imagination, it is considered that Uncle Sam's arsenal was crucial for the Allied victory, but was it really like that? Join us to discover what weapons U.S. soldiers used to face the most brutal war of the 20th century. To talk about American weapons in World War II, there is no better starting point than the legendary M1 Garand rifle. This semi-automatic weapon was one of Uncle Sam's favorite tools from its commissioning in 1936. It wasn't until well into the 1960s that it was replaced by the M16 assault rifle. The genesis of the Garand dates back to the 1930s, and was the product of an idea by Canadian engineer John Cancius Garand, who soon stamped his last name on the innovative rifle. For many in the military, including the legendary George Patton, this was not only the best rifle of the war, but also the most effective ever produced. We are not exaggerating when we say that Washington loved this weapon, and that many attributed several American victories to the effectiveness of the Garand. The M1 Garand was the first semi-automatic rifle used on a massive scale in an army. This characteristic was very revolutionary for the time, since it was the only basic equipment weapon that, to fire, didn't need to be cocked after each shot, something that did happen with British, German and Soviet rifles such as the Lee Enfield, the Kar-98 and the Mosin Nagant. The M1 measured 1.10 meters, of which 61 centimeters corresponded to the barrel. In total, its weight was 4.3 kilograms, which seems like a beast these days, when you consider that the average assault rifle weighs half that or less. It fired .30-60 Springfield ammunition, with a rate of fire of approximately 40 to 50 rounds per minute. Initially there were some distribution problems due to difficulties between Winchester and Springfield, the two companies that produced it. Added to these problems was the reluctance of the older commanders, who did not want to retire the classic M1903 from the First World War. When they saw the Garand in action, they had no choice but to surrender to its effectiveness and stopping power. But beyond the M1 Garand, if there is a weapon that went down in the history books as one of the most iconic of Uncle Sam during World War II, it is the Thompson submachine gun. Known as Tommy and nicknamed typewriter due to the sound it made when firing, this weapon was designed in the United States by a general whose last name ended up baptizing it. The Thompson submachine gun could use magazines for 20 or 30.45 caliber cartridges and, contrary to what it seems in movies and war games, it was rather bulky and heavy, difficult to control. It was not used as much and was not meant to be carried by a particular officer. Its quality was not precision or portability, but the ability to deliver bursts of fire that cleared entire trenches in a few seconds. In fact, it could fire a brutal 1,000 rounds per minute, enough to take out several enemy soldiers in a single pass. In terms of dimensions, the Thompson submachine gun was considerably smaller than carbines or the M1 Garand. But its 85 centimeters in length were reflected in its almost 5 kilograms of weight. It was not exactly a light tool, although this did not stop the soldiers from falling deeply in love with its capabilities. But not all weapons fire. One of the favorite toys of American soldiers during World War II were the Mk2 grenades. It was an anti-personnel fragmentation unit that, by then, had been in service for almost 30 years, so the troops were very familiar with its operation. It was the most widely used handheld explosive by the United States Army, since it caused damage in 360 degrees. When the casing exploded, it did so causing lethal injuries to anyone within a few meters of the impact area. Not only that, but it hurled splinters and fragments that hurt those farther away. Furthermore, it was more lethal than its counterparts. Soldiers carried at least 2 of these grenades in their equipment, and gave them the nickname pineapples because of their particular shape. The Mk2 was small but mighty. With a diameter of 6 centimeters, a total length of 11 centimeters and a total weight of 600 grams, it was a small dose of destruction within reach. But the Mk2 was not the only grenade used during World War II. The anti-tank units of the M9 rifle were also part of the fight. It was basically a lighter, easier-to-launch version of the M10, adapted for handheld use. There was also, although on a smaller scale, the M17, which was produced and shipped to Europe mainly in 1943 and 1944. Finally, let's talk about machine guns. The Browning M1919 is a 7.62 mm caliber medium machine gun. Its length was 1.14 meters, of which 60 centimeters were for the cannon. In terms of mass, its weight was around 14 kilos. It was a robust and powerful weapon, with a rate of fire between 400 and 600 rounds per minute. Its effective range was one of its main attractions, 1,370 meters, which was enough to shower any enemy vehicle with bullets. As for feeding, it used 250 round cloth or metal link belts. As a company or battalion support weapon, the M1919 required at least a two-man crew, though ideally 4 soldiers would maneuver this little beast, the shooter, the loader, and 2 ammo carriers. Another great American machine gun was the Johnson M1941, designed in the late 1930s and commissioned in 1940. It was a lighter weapon, sharing several parts with the Johnson M1941 rifle and M1947 carbine. This was one of the few recoil-operated machine guns that saw use during World War II. It was fed by a single-row curved magazine that was inserted into the left side of the receiver. Its most important performance was as the main weapon of the so-called Devil's Brigade, made up of US and Canadian soldiers. It was not as popular as the M1919, but its role within special units was essential to penetrate the ranks of the Axis in Europe. It is estimated that, during the war, the North American war industry produced 47,000 million cartridges for various weapons, and several million units of pistols, rifles, and machine guns that ended up in the hands of soldiers. These are just some of the many variants that were issued to the troops, not always in the best of conditions or fully usable. Knowing this, one can only conclude that World War II was hell on earth, even when armed to the teeth. Thank you for staying until the end. We'll meet again in the next military history video to review more events that left their mark on history.